I remember the exact moment everything changed. The room was full of people, relatives, neighbors, family, friends, all gathered for my cousin's engagement. Laughter was echoing off the walls, the music was light, and for a while it felt like a normal day. I was standing near the back, holding a plate of food I had barely touched, when my father stood up in the center of the living room and asked everyone for silence. He spoke with that proud and commanding voice he always used, the one that made everyone stop and listen. But the words that came out of his mouth next felt like they were ripping something out of me, piece by piece. He said, "From today onward, she is no longer my daughter." Just like that. No hesitation. No explanation. No emotion. As if he was just changing the setting on a TV remote. The room went silent. I felt everyone's eyes land on me at the same time. I remember hearing a fork drop somewhere. I remember the way my mother froze, her hand covering her mouth. And I remember the way my throat tightened so hard that I couldn't breathe or speak. I just stood there, staring at the man who raised me, the man I used to run to when I was scared of thunderstorms, the man who once picked me up from school in the rain and carried me home on his back. My father. My hero. Now a stranger. But the truth is, maybe this moment didn't start here. Maybe it started long before that day. Maybe it began in the small disappointments, the tiny cracks in expectations, the quiet fights, the subtle shifts in how he looked at me. Or maybe it started when I decided I didn't want to live the life he had planned for me. People always talk about how parents know best, how they want the best for you. But what happens when their idea of best is something that suffocates you? Something that feels like it's slowly erasing your own identity? Growing up, my father was respected by everyone. He had this reputation, strong, proud, disciplined, the kind of man who believed that family honor was everything. And I was his daughter. His eldest. The one who had to be perfect. The one who had to set the example. I worked hard in school, I followed the rules, I didn't talk back. I tried to be everything he wanted, even when it felt like I was shrinking inside myself. But the older I got, the more I started to see the world beyond our house, beyond his expectations. I realized I had dreams of my own. I wanted to study something different, choose my own career, make my own choices, not just do what he told me to do. And that was where everything started falling apart. My father didn't see my dreams as dreams. He saw them as rebellion, disobedience, disrespect. We argued. Not loudly but intensely. His disappointment in me began showing up in the way he spoke to me, the way he stopped asking how my day was, the way his eyes seemed to look through me instead of at me. My mother tried to keep the peace, but she was caught between a husband who didn't bend and a daughter who didn't want to break. And then something happened, something I thought was small, something I believed could be fixed or explained. But to him it was the final straw. The disappointment he could not forgive. The thing that made him stand up in front of everyone and say those words that felt like a sentence passed down without trial. But what hurt even more wasn't just what he said that day. It was how no one stopped him. No one said, "This is too much." No one came to stand beside me. Everyone just watched. Some with shock, some with pity, some with silent agreement. Even my mother stayed frozen, torn and helpless. And I realized in that moment that I was alone. Truly alone. I didn't cry, not there. I didn't say a word. I put down the untouched plate of food. I walked out of the house, slowly, calmly, as if I was just stepping outside for air. But the truth was, I wasn't planning to return. I didn't know where I was going or what I was going to do. All I knew was that I couldn't stay in a place where my existence was something that could be announced as canceled, like a mistake that could be erased with a single sentence. When I stepped outside, the air was cool. The sky was clear. I remember thinking how strange it was that the world could continue so peacefully while mine was falling apart. I walked down the street without looking back. No one followed. No one called my name. That night was the beginning of a new life. A life without the name I grew up carrying. A life without the family I thought would always be my home. A life where I had to figure out who I was when I was no longer someone's daughter. But let me be honest, it wasn't courage that made me leave. It was pain. Pure heartbreak. And that heartbreak shaped everything that came next. Every choice. Every fear. Every step. People think disappearing is easy. They think it's dramatic, bold, freeing. But disappearing means letting go of everything you've ever known. It means learning to breathe again in a world where no one knows you. It means facing the silence of having no one to call, no one to run to, no one waiting for you. And yet, sometimes leaving is the only way to survive. What happened next, the places I went, the people I met, the things I had to learn the hard way, that is where this story truly begins. Because leaving wasn't the end. It was just the first step. And as much as I wanted to forget the past had its own way of finding me again. But I'll tell you that part in the next chapter. Because the story doesn't end with me walking away. That was only the beginning. I didn't have a plan that night. I wish I could say I was brave or strategic or smart about it. But the truth is I was just walking. One street turned into another, then another. I kept my head down, wiping my face every few minutes even though I hadn't cried yet. It was like my body was preparing for tears that wouldn't come. The city looked different that night. Streetlights flickered, cars passed without slowing, and I felt small in a world that suddenly felt too big. I ended up at the bus station. I didn't choose it intentionally. My feet just took me there like I was being led by something inside me that knew I couldn't go back. I stood there staring at the destinations on the board. Cities I had only heard about. Places I had never imagined going. I had a little money in my bag. Not enough to start a new life but enough to get away for a while. I bought a ticket to the place with the earliest departure time. I didn't even look at the name. When I got on the bus it was nearly empty. A few travelers, a couple of students, an old man sleeping with his head leaning against the window. I sat in the back, curled up near the corner like I was trying to make myself smaller. The bus started moving and I watched the city fade behind me, the lights becoming distant dots. That's when the tears finally came. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just quiet and steady, like they had been waiting to fall for months. The kind of tears that had weight. I tried to wipe them away quickly but I couldn't stop them. It wasn't just sadness. It was a feeling of being unanchored. Like every piece of who I was had been cut loose. As the bus rolled on, I closed my eyes and let my mind drift back to before everything fell apart. Before disappointment became the main language in our home. I used to be close to my father. People who know us now wouldn't believe it. But there was a time when I was his favorite. When I was small, I used to sit with him in the evenings while he read the newspaper. He would point out headlines and explain grown-up things to me as if I was capable of understanding them. I liked that. I liked feeling trusted, important. He used to tell people, "She thinks deeply. She'll make me proud one day." I remember those words. They used to make me glow inside. But as I got older, proud slowly became obedient. The compliments turned into instructions. Then expectations. Then demands. And eventually silence. Everything changed around the time I turned 16. That was when I started asking questions. Not to challenge him, but to understand. I wanted to know why certain things had to be done a certain way. Why my future had to follow a path that felt like it belonged to someone else. He didn't like questions. To him, questions meant doubt. Doubt meant disrespect. So our relationship slowly shifted from warmth to tension. Not loud fights. Not dramatic arguments. But quiet distance. Stiff conversations. Moments of eye contact that ended too quickly. My mother saw what was happening. She would sit next to me at night and tell me to be patient. "Your father loves you," she would say softly. "He only wants what is good." I believed her. Or I tried to. But love shouldn't feel like fear. The bus continued through the night. The sky outside was dark, and the only sound was the steady hum of the engine. I wondered whether my mother was crying at home, whether she was searching for me, whether my father even cared that I was gone. A part of me hoped he would come looking for me. Another part of me hoped he wouldn't. When the bus finally stopped, the sun was rising. A soft orange light spilled across the horizon, warming the sky. I stepped off with my small bag and for the first time in my life I was somewhere where no one knew my name. No expectations. No labels. No history. I thought it would feel freeing. But instead it felt like standing on a cliff with no idea how high the drop was. I spent the first day just walking again. I found a small cafe and sat there for hours, sipping tea slowly to make it last. I watched people come and go, living their own lives with their own stories. I wondered if any of them were running from something too. Eventually, I met someone. Her name was Alina. She worked at the cafe. She noticed me sitting alone for too long and came over with a soft smile. She didn't ask me too many questions. She just said, "You look tired. Are you okay?" The kindness in her voice felt like a hand reaching out in the dark. I didn't tell her everything. I just told her I needed a place to stay for a few days. She said she knew someone who rented out small rooms for cheap. It wasn't much. A single bed, a small window, a wooden chair, but it was enough. Enough to breathe. Enough to not feel like I was floating away. The nights were the hardest. Every sound made me jump. Every quiet moment made my thoughts too loud. I replayed my father's words over and over. "She is no longer my daughter." I wondered if he meant it. I wondered if he regretted it. I wondered if one day he would miss me. I wanted to believe he would. But I also knew how stubborn he was. How deeply he believed in being right. Days turned into weeks. I found small work here and there. Cleaning. Helping at shops. Nothing big but enough to survive. I didn't talk much. I kept to myself. But the silence didn't fix anything. It only gave my memories more room to echo. Sometimes I would catch myself imagining going home. Imagining walking through the front door and seeing my mother rush to me. Imagining my father pausing, his face softening. Imagining him saying he didn't mean it. But imagination is a dangerous comfort. Especially when reality holds no promises. I thought I had left everything behind. I thought distance would protect me. I thought disappearing would let me start over. But the world is small in ways we never expect. People talk. Stories travel. Secrets don't stay buried forever. One evening, as the sun was setting and I was closing up at the small shop where I was helping that week, I heard my name. My full name. Spoken clearly. Firmly. Familiar. I froze. I turned slowly. And when I saw who was standing there, my heart stopped. The past had found me. And everything I thought I had escaped was standing right in front of me. I didn't know whether to run, to speak, or to break. But I'll tell you what happened next in the next part. Because the story was never just about leaving. It was about what happens when the past refuses to let go. I blinked, unable to move for a moment. The person standing at the edge of the shop was someone I never thought I'd see again. Not here, not now. A familiar face from my past, but with eyes that carried questions, judgment, and a shadow of fear. My stomach twisted. I wanted to run, to disappear again, but something inside me stopped me. Part of me needed to know why, part of me feared the answer. Why are you here? I asked, my voice trembling more than I wanted it to. They hesitated. I needed to find you, they said softly. I didn't know where else to look. The words hung in the air, thick with meaning. I could feel the tension building like a storm about to break. This was not a friendly reunion. It wasn't the comforting search of someone who cared. This was about the past catching up with me, about secrets, about the choices I had tried to hide, about my father's announcement that had shattered my life. I closed my eyes for a moment and tried to breathe. You shouldn't have, I said finally. You don't know what I've been through. You don't know what he, my father, did. They looked down, shame flickering in their expression. I know more than you think. That's why I'm here. Because there's more to what happened than you realize. I froze again. More than I realized? I had thought I had left everything behind, every disappointment, every accusation, every word that had cut me deep. But hearing that, I realized my past wasn't just following me, it was chasing me. And maybe it wasn't just my father's anger I had to deal with. Maybe there were other pieces, other people, other truths I didn't know yet. I wanted to close the shop, lock the door, and disappear into the night. But curiosity, that dangerous thing that had gotten me into trouble before, rooted me to the spot. Tell me, I whispered, my voice small. Tell me everything you know. They looked around as if making sure no one else could hear, and then stepped closer. It's about your father, they said quietly. And not just him. It's about what your family has been hiding. About why he reacted the way he did. My heart thumped so hard I could hear it. Hiding what? I asked, my voice catching. What are you talking about? They hesitated again. Your father's anger isn't just about you. Not completely. There are complications. Things that happened before you were born. Things that people in your family hoped you'd never find out. But now you've run and they're worried. They're afraid of what you might do with the truth. I swallowed hard. The words didn't make sense at first, but slowly they began to sink in. Maybe the disappointment, the public declaration, the feeling of being erased, maybe it was part of something bigger. Something I couldn't see from the corner of my own pain. Something I had never been told. I wanted to ask questions, but my mind was spinning too fast. Why now? Why come to me now? I asked, my voice almost a whisper. Because, they said, glancing down, there's a chance you could fix things. Or, at least, understand them. Before it gets worse. The words were like fire and ice at the same time. Fix things? Understand? I didn't know whether I was ready for any of that. All I knew was that I had spent weeks trying to find myself, trying to disappear from a life that had suffocated me. And now the past, the people, the secrets, the anger, was demanding I face it head-on. I felt torn. Part of me wanted to scream and run again. Part of me wanted to throw myself at this person and beg them to tell me everything. But deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. Whatever secrets were hidden in my family, whatever shadows had shaped my father's anger, they weren't going to be revealed in one night. They wouldn't be simple. And they might not be safe. I thought about my mother. The gentle, quiet presence who had tried to keep the family together. I wondered if she had known more than she let on. If she had tried to protect me by staying silent. I thought about my father, how a man who once held me with tenderness could become someone capable of erasing me from his life. And I realized I didn't know him at all. Not really. Not the man behind the public pride, the anger, the rules. As I processed all of this, I noticed the city around me. People moved past the shop, unaware of the tension inside. Some laughed. Some argued. Some simply walked with their own stories. And it struck me how small my conflict seemed to everyone else, but how enormous it felt to me. The weight of a family's expectations, the burden of secrets, the pressure to fit into a role I had never wanted, it all pressed down on me like a storm cloud I couldn't escape. I wanted to run, but my feet stayed planted. My mind raced. Could I trust this person? Could I trust anyone? And if I did follow them, what would I find? Answers? Danger? Or just more questions? And then there was another thought, one I hadn't dared admit to myself until now. What if the anger of my father, the shame, the declaration of rejection, was only the beginning? What if my disappearance had triggered something bigger than I could imagine? Something that reached beyond my life, beyond my choices, into things I didn't even understand yet? I realized then that my story wasn't just about me leaving. It was about uncovering the layers beneath everything I had been told. The layers of control, of fear, of pride, of secrets buried deep in my family. And the more I thought about it, the more I understood that I was standing at the edge of something I couldn't yet see, something that could change everything. I looked at the person again. They were watching me carefully, waiting for a decision. Waiting for me to take the next step. And I knew that once I followed them, there would be no turning back. I wanted to step back. I wanted to go hide. But I also wanted to know the truth. And that desire, stronger than fear, made me nod slowly. Okay, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I'll listen. But you have to tell me everything. They nodded, and for a moment the tension in the air felt like a living thing, tight, heavy, dangerous. And as they began to speak, I realized that my life, the life I had thought I was running toward, was about to be rewritten in ways I could never have imagined. I didn't know it yet, but that night would mark the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything I had believed about my family, about trust, and about who I was supposed to be. Every secret, every disappointment, every hidden truth was about to surface, and I had no choice but to face it. Because some things once set in motion cannot be stopped. The days that followed were a blur of whispered conversations, cautious glances, and unanswered questions. I followed the person through narrow streets, into small cafes, and finally to a dimly lit apartment where they claimed I could be safe, for now. I didn't know who to trust. Every creak of the floorboards, every knock on the door made my heart race. The tension felt alive, pressing against my ribs like something ready to explode. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but I knew that would make me vulnerable. Instead, I listened, taking in the fragments they shared, each piece of information more unsettling than the last. My father's anger, I discovered, wasn't simply about me failing to meet expectations. There were whispers of events long buried, decisions made years ago that had shaped everything in our family. Things my mother had kept secret, things my father had carried like a shadow. And now, for some reason, they were spilling over, reaching toward me. The person speaking was careful, measured, but I could sense the urgency behind their words. You need to understand, they said, eyes dark with worry. Your father, he's not just angry. He's afraid. And that fear has controlled so much of what's happened in your family. I wanted to argue. I wanted to reject the idea that fear had any place in the decisions that had hurt me. But deep down, a cold knot of truth twisted in my stomach. Fear can make people cruel. Fear can make people say things they never truly mean. And fear can make people try to control everyone around them, including the ones they claim to love. They paused, letting the words sink in. I could feel the tension in the room thickening. Outside, the city hummed with life, oblivious to the storm building in that small apartment. And in that moment, I realized how fragile everything was. One wrong move, one word too many, and I could lose whatever sliver of safety I had carved out for myself. Over the next few days, I began to piece together a map of secrets. Each revelation cut deeper than the last. Old letters, photographs, conversations overheard. People who had once seemed distant were suddenly connected to the hidden truths, each holding a piece of the puzzle I had no idea existed. There were lies told to protect me, lies told to control me, lies told to keep shame buried where no one could see it. And every discovery made me question everything I had believed about my family, about my father, about myself. The tension didn't only come from the past. It followed me into every waking moment. My father's words still echoed in my mind, sharper and colder than any knife. I imagined him speaking them in front of everyone, and I felt the sting of humiliation all over again. But now I also felt something new, the fear that this story, the secrets, the anger, the past, was reaching toward me, that it wouldn't let me escape so easily. One evening, the person I was trusting led me to a quiet park on the outskirts of the city. The sun was setting, casting long shadows that stretched across the empty benches. They stopped and turned to me, eyes serious. "You need to know," they said, "that what's coming isn't just about understanding your father. It's about decisions you're going to have to make. Decisions that could change everything." I felt my pulse quicken. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to be forced into a corner where every choice was a trap. But I knew I couldn't turn back now. Whatever secrets were buried, whatever danger was waiting, I had already stepped too far. "Why me?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "Why does it have to be me?" They shook their head. "Because you're the only one who can face it. You've run, yes, but running won't protect you. And it certainly won't protect anyone else who might get caught in this." I looked away, scanning the horizon as if the city itself held answers. But all I saw were buildings, streets, and the fading light. Nothing would prepare me for what I was about to face. Nothing would soften the blow of the truth. In the following nights, the tension became unbearable. I started noticing small signs. Someone following me at a distance, strange messages left anonymously, glimpses of figures in the shadows. The city, which had felt like a refuge at first, began to feel like a cage. Every sound made me jump. Every knock at the door made my stomach churn. And through it all, the words my father had spoken loomed larger, haunting me. "She is no longer my daughter." It wasn't just about the words anymore. It was about what they represented. Control, power, fear, shame. And now, with the secrets unraveling around me, I realized that I had stepped into something far bigger than I could have imagined. A storm that had been brewing long before I was born. I began seeing patterns, connections I hadn't noticed before. People I had thought were kind or indifferent were deeply involved in the family's hidden history. Friends of my father, distant relatives, even neighbors, they all seemed to know pieces of the story. And somehow, the more I learned, the more dangerous it felt. Every revelation carried a weight. Every truth was a step closer to something that could destroy not just me, but everything I had once called home. There were moments when I wanted to turn back. To go home, to confront my father directly, to demand answers from him. But fear stopped me. Not just fear of him, but fear of what I might uncover. Fear of the consequences. Fear that once I knew the full story, I could never go back to the person I was before. And then one night, it happened. A message arrived, simple but terrifying: "Stop digging or you'll regret it." I didn't know who sent it. I didn't know why. All I knew was that the tension I had felt growing over weeks had suddenly become sharp, immediate, dangerous. My heart raced as I held the phone, the shadows of my room stretching across the walls. This was no longer just about family disappointment. This was bigger. Much bigger. I realized then that the path I had chosen, to uncover the truth, to face my father, to find my own place, was going to be far more treacherous than I had imagined. And the closer I got to answers, the more the stakes grew. I was no longer just a daughter who had been rejected. I was someone walking into a storm where every move mattered, every decision could backfire, and the truth itself could be the most dangerous force of all. And yet, despite the fear, despite the threats, despite the danger closing in from all directions, I knew I couldn't stop. I couldn't turn away. Because some things, once you begin to uncover them, demand to be faced, no matter how high the cost. I didn't know what awaited me next. I didn't know if I would survive what was coming. But one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. And as I lay awake that night, listening to the distant sounds of the city, I realized the climax. The confrontation I had been running from, the truths I had been hiding from myself, was coming faster than I could imagine. The tension, the secrets, the anger, the fear, it was all converging, and there would be no turning back. The storm was about to break. The days that followed the anonymous message were the hardest I had ever faced. Every knock on the door, every unexpected phone call, every shadow in the street made my heart pound. I couldn't sleep properly, and even small tasks felt impossible. The weight of uncertainty was crushing, and the tension felt alive, almost as if the walls themselves were closing in on me. Then one evening, as I walked through a crowded street trying to distract myself, I saw someone I never expected. Not just someone from my past, but someone I thought had no connection to me anymore. Someone who had vanished from my life years ago, someone my father had always kept secret. My breath caught. I froze in the middle of the sidewalk, unable to move. "Do you remember me?" the figure asked softly, stepping closer. It was my uncle, or at least I had always thought he was. A man I had barely known, someone who had disappeared under mysterious circumstances when I was a child. And now he was standing there as if nothing had changed, but his eyes were intense, urgent, and full of things he wasn't saying. I wanted to turn and run. Part of me wanted to scream. Part of me wanted to demand answers right there, in front of everyone. But I couldn't. Because deep down I realized this wasn't just an accident. He had come for a reason. And whatever that reason was, it would change everything. They told me you were gone, he said, voice low, almost a whisper. But I needed to see for myself. You need to know the truth. I stepped back, my stomach twisting. The truth? About what? About my father? About the threats. My voice was trembling and I could feel my hands shake. He hesitated, glancing around the crowded street as if making sure no one was listening. Then he pulled me aside into the shadow of a narrow alley. My heart raced. I had already uncovered so many secrets, faced so much danger, and yet, somehow, I knew this was going to be different. This was something bigger. Your father's anger, it's not just about you, he said finally. It's never been just about you. There are things in the family, things you don't know, that could destroy everything if they come out. I swallowed hard. My mind raced. I had already discovered fragments of the past, hidden letters, pieces of conversations. But this felt larger, more dangerous, more urgent. What do you mean? I whispered. He looked me in the eye. There's someone else, someone your father was protecting all these years. And they're back now. And they're looking for you. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I had thought the threats, the secrets, and the tension were the worst of it. But now I realized there was someone else. A new force in the story, someone whose motives I didn't understand. Someone who could make my father's anger look small in comparison. Why me? Why now? I asked, my voice shaking. Why are they looking for me? Because, he said slowly, you're the key. You've always been the key. Your father tried to shield you from it, from all of it. But now, it's out of his control. And if you don't act carefully, if you make the wrong move, it won't just be you in danger. It could ruin everything your family has tried to hide for decades. I felt like the ground beneath me was slipping away. I had left my home to escape anger, to escape judgment, to escape being erased. And now I realized the danger wasn't over. It had only grown. The past, the secrets, the anger, the threats, they were all pieces of a much larger puzzle. And somehow I was right in the center. I wanted to run. I wanted to disappear again. But I knew I couldn't. Because I had already begun this journey. I had already uncovered parts of the story that couldn't be unseen. And now, with this new twist, with this new threat, the stakes were higher than ever. Over the next few days, the tension became unbearable. I started noticing things I hadn't seen before. Strange cars parked near the apartment, people who seemed to appear and disappear in shadows, messages that hinted at knowledge only my family could have shared. Every sound made my pulse race. Every glance over my shoulder made me feel hunted. And then came another revelation. I learned that my father's anger, the declaration that I was no longer his daughter, was not only about control. It was about protection. About shielding me from something he had always feared I would discover. Something that had been buried for years, something that could change the way I saw my family, my father, and even myself. The more I learned, the more the lines between right and wrong blurred. The anger that had once felt like betrayal now seemed to hold another layer. A hidden fear, a desperate attempt to keep me safe. And yet, that protection had come at a cost. My freedom. My identity. My sense of belonging. And just when I thought the tension couldn't rise any higher, I received another message. This one was different. No threat, no warning, just a name. A name I had never heard before. And suddenly, the story I thought I understood became even more complicated. I didn't know who this person was, what their connection was to my father, or why they were suddenly part of the story. All I knew was that the storm I had been running from had grown larger, stronger, more dangerous. And now, I had to navigate not just the anger of a father, not just the secrets of my family, but a new force whose intentions were unknown and whose presence could tip everything into chaos. I realized then that there was no simple resolution. No one person could untangle this web alone. And as the days passed, as the shadows grew longer and the threats became more tangible, I knew that the climax, the moment where all these conflicts collided, was fast approaching. I didn't know how I would survive it. I didn't know if I would recognize the truth when it finally came. But I knew one thing. The second twist, the hidden force, the threat I hadn't even seen coming yet, had changed the rules of the game. And nothing, not even leaving home, could protect me now. The tension was unbearable. The stakes had never been higher. And as I prepared for what was coming, I realized that the story I thought was mine alone had become something bigger, something darker, something I might never fully escape. And in that moment, I understood that the real danger wasn't just my father's anger, or the secrets of the past. It was the unknown, the unseen, the forces that had been waiting for me all along, ready to push me to the edge. The night everything came to a head felt like the world had tilted on its axis. The city lights blurred through the rain as I followed my uncle to a secluded warehouse on the outskirts of town. Every step felt heavy, each echo against the wet pavement a reminder that the storm of my life had finally arrived. The tension that had been building for weeks pressed down on me so hard I thought I might crumble. Inside, the space was dimly lit, shadows stretching across crates and abandoned machinery. I could hear footsteps behind me, hesitant, cautious. And then I saw him, my father. Not shouting, not angry, not the man who had publicly erased me from his life. Just standing there, silent, eyes fixed on me. The way he looked was different. Vulnerable. Afraid. I felt something strange stir inside me, a mix of anger, longing, and something I couldn't name. Before I could speak, my uncle stepped forward. Everything you've been told, everything you've seen, there's more to it. You need to hear it from him. My father's voice broke the silence. I couldn't protect you any other way. His words were low, heavy, filled with a weight I hadn't understood until now. There are things in this family, things I tried to shield you from. The anger, the declaration. It wasn't just punishment. It was fear. Fear that you'd be dragged into something you didn't understand and couldn't survive. I shook my head. Fear? You erased me. You told everyone I was gone. How could that be protection? He looked down, pain etched into every line of his face. Because I made mistakes. I trusted people who should never have been trusted. People who would use you to destroy everything we built. I didn't want that to happen to you. I thought, maybe wrongly, that pushing you away was the only way to keep you safe. I wanted to scream, to cry, to throw all my anger at him. But then I realized something. His anger, the public rejection, the fear, the secrets. It had all been part of a larger picture I hadn't been able to see. And now, finally, I could. Just as I started to speak, a sound made all of us tense. Footsteps, fast, determined, closing in from the entrance. The person we had all feared was here. The one my uncle had hinted at. Someone connected to the hidden forces that had been chasing me since I left home. A shadow moved in the doorway. And then, slowly, the figure stepped forward. It wasn't a stranger. It was someone I had trusted, someone I had never expected to betray me. My breath caught. Betrayal had a face, and it was the last thing I saw coming. You shouldn't have run, the figure said, voice calm, dangerous. Now you're in the middle of this and there's no turning back. I felt my pulse spike. My father stepped forward, protective, angry, desperate. Stay back, he shouted. You have no idea what you're doing. The tension exploded. The room seemed to shrink around us, every shadow, every heartbeat magnified. I realized then that the real danger hadn't been leaving home, hadn't been my father's anger, hadn't been the secrets I had uncovered. The danger was here. Someone who wanted to control everything, someone who had been manipulating the shadows all along. I didn't know what to do, but I knew I had to act. I stepped forward, confronting the figure with a courage I hadn't known I had. I'm not your pawn, I said firmly. You can't control me. I'm done running. For a moment, silence. And then something shifted. The figure's eyes softened, but only slightly. You don't know the half of it, they whispered. But now that you're here, there's no way back for anyone. In that moment, I understood everything. The anger, the threats, the secrets, the public humiliation. It had all been part of a larger game, one that had nothing to do with whether I had disappointed my father or not. It was about survival, about protecting the people I loved, about navigating a family legacy I had never been told existed. I looked at my father, then my uncle, then the figure before me. And I realized something else. I wasn't just a daughter who had been rejected. I was the one who could change the story. The one who could decide how it ended. The storm reached its peak. Emotions collided, words were exchanged, truths were laid bare. My father admitted what he had hidden for years, the sacrifices he had made, the mistakes he had tried to fix in ways I had never understood. My uncle revealed the paths he had walked to protect me. And the figure, the betrayer, finally gave a hint of their true motive, one that changed everything I thought I knew about the past. And just when it seemed like the tension would finally resolve, just when the air began to feel lighter, the figure smiled. Not cruelly, not angrily, but with a knowing certainty that left a chill down my spine. You think this is over? They said softly. You're only beginning to understand the rules of this game. The real truth is still out there. My heart stopped. The revelation hit me like lightning. All the anger, all the fear, all the betrayal, everything had led to this moment. And now, with the climax of the story unfolding before me, I realized the final twist wasn't just about my father, my family, or even me. It was bigger than any of us could have imagined. The storm wasn't over. It had only shifted. And I understood that the next steps I took could change everything, for better or worse. And in that charged, dangerous silence, I knew one thing for certain. My life, my family, and my story would never be the same again. After that night in the warehouse, things began to change. The tension that had been suffocating me for weeks slowly began to lift, not because everything was suddenly perfect, but because the truth in all its complexity had finally been revealed. The anger, the fear, the secrets, everything that had once felt like chains around me, had been brought into the open, and I realized that acknowledgement was the first step toward freedom. My father stayed close, but differently now. Not with the pride and control that had once dominated our home, but with caution, humility, and an attempt at understanding. He didn't apologize in words at first, he couldn't, but his actions spoke volumes. He waited for me to decide how much I wanted to be part of this family again. For the first time, I felt that he respected my choices. That respect, strange as it felt, was what had been missing all along. I learned the full extent of what my uncle had been protecting me from. Years ago, a complicated network of family rivalries and financial entanglements had put my family, and me, at risk. My father's public rejection had been his desperate, misguided way to shield me from threats I could never have imagined as a teenager. It had been harsh, unfair, and cruel, but it had been motivated by fear and love tangled together in a way I was only beginning to understand. The figure who had confronted us in the warehouse, the one whose motives had seemed mysterious and dangerous, eventually revealed their connection. They were a distant relative, estranged for decades, who had been monitoring family affairs and feared that my curiosity and my father's missteps could allow long-buried threats to resurface. The betrayal I had felt initially turned out to be a warning disguised as intimidation. Their actions, though extreme, had ultimately prevented harm from coming to me. Understanding this shifted the way I saw the conflict entirely. Not everything had been what it seemed. As the days turned into weeks, I slowly began reconnecting with my family. It wasn't instant. Healing never is. My father and I had long conversations, sometimes heated, sometimes tearful, where I expressed the years of pain I had carried, and he shared the reasons behind his decisions, the fears that had driven him, and the mistakes he regretted. I understood finally that anger, disappointment, and fear can coexist with love, even if they manifest in ways that hurt deeply. My mother, who had remained quietly supportive all along, finally shared her perspective. She had tried to mediate, to protect me, and to maintain peace, often carrying her own burdens silently. Her strength and her compassion became an anchor I hadn't realized I needed until I truly faced the past. I began to see that my family, flawed as it was, had always been acting from fear, pride, and love, all tangled together in complicated ways. During this time, I also took steps to reclaim my own independence. Leaving home had taught me resilience and courage I hadn't known I possessed. I found work, established a small apartment, and slowly built a life that was truly my own. I learned that the power to define myself didn't come from others' approval, nor from running away. It came from understanding my past, facing my fears, and making choices with clarity and intention. The threats that had once felt imminent gradually dissipated. With the knowledge I had gained, the guidance of my uncle, and cautious cooperation from my father, we were able to address the lingering dangers that had been hidden from me for so long. The sense of being hunted, the shadows that had followed me finally faded, replaced by a cautious sense of safety. For the first time in months, I could breathe without fear. And yet, even as the immediate dangers passed, the lessons remained. I realized that anger and disappointment don't always tell the full story. That people, even those we think we understand completely, can act out of fear, love, or a desire to protect. That sometimes the conflicts we experience aren't personal, they are part of something larger, woven into the patterns of family, history, and circumstance. I reflected on how leaving home had shaped me. Vanishing had been an act of desperation, yes, but it had also been a journey of self-discovery. I had learned courage, independence, and resilience. I had learned to trust my instincts, to question assumptions, and to see beyond appearances. Most importantly, I had learned that forgiveness, both of others and of myself, is not about forgetting but about understanding and choosing how to move forward. The final twist came unexpectedly. One morning, while going through old letters my father had kept hidden, I discovered a note addressed to me, written years ago, never sent. In it, my father expressed his love, regret, and hope for my future. But it ended with a single line that made me pause. The path you take will shape not just you, but the family I cannot protect if you fail. Choose wisely, my daughter. It was a reminder that even after everything, some parts of life remain unpredictable, some challenges continue, and the choices we make carry weight beyond ourselves. That note changed something inside me. It reminded me that life isn't about erasing the past or pretending it didn't hurt. It's about acknowledging it, learning from it, and making decisions that honor your own truth while navigating the complexities of relationships, love, and family. In the weeks that followed, our family began to rebuild in small but meaningful ways. Conversations were more honest, boundaries more respected, and forgiveness began to take root. I reconnected with my father not as someone who controlled me, but as a man trying to reconcile his mistakes with the love he had always carried. I rebuilt trust with my mother and uncle. And I strengthened the parts of myself that had been almost lost in fear, anger, and uncertainty. The story of my disappearance, my father's declaration, and the secrets that followed became a turning point, not just in my life but in the life of my family. We didn't erase the past. We didn't pretend the hurt didn't exist. But we faced it together, and in doing so we found a new way forward. As I looked back on everything, I realized the key takeaway. Life is messy, families are complicated, and people can hurt the ones they love, often without realizing the depth of the impact. But courage, understanding, and compassion can heal even the deepest wounds. Running away had given me time to see the truth. Facing the truth gave me the power to reclaim my life. And through it all, I discovered that love, even when expressed imperfectly, is still worth fighting for. I no longer feared the shadow of rejection. I no longer felt like a daughter erased. I had reclaimed my identity, my voice, and my place in the world. And even though the unexpected twists of life would continue to come, I knew I could meet them with courage and clarity. The story ended not with perfect resolution, but with understanding, growth, and a sense of hard-earned peace. I had vanished once, but now I had returned, not to the person I was before, but to someone stronger, wiser, and capable of navigating the storms of life without losing myself. And as I closed the final chapter on that period of my life, I understood that the journey was never truly about disappearing or being rejected. It was about discovering who I am, the strength I carry, and the power of facing the truth, no matter how painful, no matter how complicated, no matter how unexpected the twists along the way. I had vanished to escape pain, but I had returned to claim my life, and that was the most powerful story I could ever tell. Keyword integration for SEO to make it ready for narration.